Heartbreak isn't a metaphor for dying. To a specific ancient part of your brain, it registers as an actual, literal threat to your survival. And that circuit is millions of years older than your ability to speak. Let's go to the exact location. Deep in your midbrain, beneath the layers of cortex that make you, the parts that plan, reason, and reflect, sits a primitive structure researchers call the separation distress system, or what neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp named the panic/grief circuit. It runs through the periaqueductal gray, the anterior cingulate, and the dorsomedial thalamus. This circuit does not care about your job, your logic, or your ability to tell yourself, it's for the best. It has one job: detect the disappearance of an attachment figure and sound the loudest alarm your nervous system has. Here is the bridge that connects biology to the raw feeling of, this feels like dying. That same circuit is the one that fires when a baby mammal, human or otherwise, is separated from its mother. Researchers studying infant vocalizations have found that separation cries in human babies, puppies, and even guinea pigs activate nearly identical neural pathways. And crucially, this circuit is wired directly into your opioid system, the same receptors involved in physical pain relief, and yes, the same receptors targeted by opioid painkillers. Social bonding, according to research published in the journal Nature, is chemically supported by these endogenous opioids. Being close to someone you love triggers a small, steady release of your own internal morphine-like chemicals. It's subtle, you don't notice it, the same way you don't notice oxygen. But it's there, every day, in a stable relationship, a quiet chemical hum of safety. This is why breakups don't just feel emotionally difficult. They function at a neurochemical level disturbingly close to opioid withdrawal. Brain imaging research, including studies referenced by Journal of Neuroscience, has shown that acute romantic rejection activates the same reward circuitry disruption seen in substance withdrawal, a crash in dopamine, a spike in the same distress circuitry that fires during physical pain. Your body isn't speaking a metaphor when it says grief hurts. It is running a withdrawal protocol. Most explanations stop there. Heartbreak is like withdrawal, and move on. But that's the 7-minute version. What's actually happening involves several layered systems firing at once, each one contributing its own piece to that full-body sensation of dying. And almost nobody walks through all of them together. The first layer is the opioid withdrawal mechanism we just covered, the sudden absence of the chemical signal your brain had come to expect from proximity to that person. The second layer is dopaminergic. Attachment, especially long-term attachment, trains your brain's reward system, specifically the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens, to associate a specific person with reward prediction. Functional MRI studies on rejected lovers, referenced in research out of institutions studying the neuroscience of romantic love, have found this circuitry behaves almost identically to addiction circuitry when the reward, the person, is suddenly and permanently unavailable. Your brain keeps predicting a reward that never arrives, over and over, which produces a craving state that can last for weeks. The third layer is autonomic, and this one is often the most physically frightening. Researchers in a field called social baseline theory have proposed something remarkable. Your nervous system doesn't just relate to another person, it outsources some of its regulatory work to them. Studies on heart rate synchrony between close partners have shown that proximity to a securely attached partner literally lowers the metabolic cost of self-regulation. Your heart rate, your cortisol, your blood pressure settle into a calmer baseline simply because that person is near. When they're gone, your nervous system has to suddenly perform regulatory work it hasn't had to do alone in years, sometimes decades. That's part of why grief can produce genuine physical symptoms: chest tightness, fatigue, a racing heart, even in people with no history of anxiety. The fourth layer is the HPA axis and cortisol cascade we've covered on this channel before. The amygdala firing, the hypothalamus and pituitary signaling the adrenal glands, flooding your system with stress hormones because your threat detection system has classified this loss as a survival-level event, not merely a sad one. Let me make this invisible convergence visible with an analogy. Picture a stone archway, the kind you'd see in an old cathedral. An archway doesn't stand because each stone is individually strong. It stands because every stone leans on its neighbors, distributing weight across the entire structure. At the very top sits the keystone. Remove it, and the whole arch doesn't just weaken, it collapses, because every other stone was relying on a structure that no longer exists. A long-term attachment works the same way. Your nervous system, your reward circuitry, your stress regulation, none of them were built to function solo. They were built to lean on the presence of another person. When that person is suddenly gone, you're not just sad. You're an archway that just lost its keystone, and every other stone is scrambling to figure out how to hold weight it was never designed to hold alone. Now here's where age changes the entire equation. The longer an attachment has existed, the more deeply your regulatory systems have been calibrated to that specific person's presence, their voice, their smell, their particular rhythm of breathing next to you at night. Research on long-term couples has found that after decades together, partners' physiological rhythms, heart rate, cortisol release, even sleep cycles become measurably entrained to each other, a phenomenon researchers call physiological synchrony. This means that after 55, following a divorce or the loss of a decades-long spouse, the keystone removal isn't just emotionally larger, it is biologically larger. You're not recalibrating from a 2-year relationship. You may be recalibrating a nervous system that hasn't self-regulated alone since your 20s or 30s. This is part of why widowhood, particularly in later life, is associated in NHS and CDC reference research with measurably elevated short-term cardiovascular risk, sometimes called the widowhood effect. So knowing all of this, the opioids, the dopamine, the outsourced regulation, the cortisol, what do you actually do? The simple, almost embarrassingly obvious insight is this. Your nervous system needs a replacement source of co-regulation, not just distraction. Studies on grief and social support consistently show that structured, predictable contact with another safe person, a regular phone call, a weekly visit, a standing coffee date, does more to stabilize a grieving nervous system than any single piece of advice or self-care routine. It's not about moving on. It's about giving your regulatory system something steady to lean against again, even temporarily, while it relearns how to hold its own weight. But here's what almost nobody tells you, and it's the strangest part of this entire mechanism. For weeks, sometimes months, after a major loss, your brain will continue producing what researchers call reunion behaviors. The urge to check your phone for a text that isn't coming, to reach for a spot in the bed that's empty, to almost dial a number out of pure habit. This isn't a sign that you're not healing. Neuroscientists studying grief describe this as functionally similar to phantom limb sensation. Your brain built an entire predictive model of a person who was present in your daily life for years, and that model doesn't get deleted the moment the person leaves. It has to be slowly, gradually updated, prediction by prediction, absence by absence. Every time you reach for the empty side of the bed and your brain re-registers not there, you are not failing to grieve correctly. You are doing the actual neurological work of grief in real time. And that brings us to something bigger than neuroscience, bigger than opioid receptors and cortisol curves. The reason your brain built this elaborate survival alarm system for losing another person in the first place is that for nearly the entirety of human evolutionary history, isolation genuinely was a death sentence. A human alone on the savannah, without a group, without a mate, without an alliance, did not survive long. So evolution wired attachment into the same ancient circuitry as literal physical survival, because for most of our species' existence, they were the same thing. When your body reacts to heartbreak as though it might die, it is not malfunctioning. It is running software written by hundreds of thousands of years of ancestors for whom that alarm kept them alive. You are not weak for feeling like you're dying. You are carrying a survival system so effective that it outlived the exact conditions it was built for. and it's still trying, however painfully, to protect you. If this helped you make sense of a feeling you've never quite had words for, send it to someone who's in the middle of a loss right now. A breakup, a divorce, a death of a spouse. Sometimes the kindest thing you can hand someone in grief isn't comfort. It's an explanation for why their body feels the way it does. Save this video too, because on the nights the ache feels inexplicable, understanding the mechanism can be its own quiet form of relief. So here's what I want to leave you with. If your nervous system is still, right now, quietly outsourcing part of its regulation to someone who is no longer there, what does that tell you about how literally, how biologically, two separate people can become one shared system? Next time, we're going to look at an emotion that runs almost the opposite direction, the slow, chronic biology of loneliness, and why your body treats prolonged isolation as a threat every bit as serious as this one.